Hello and welcome. We are team Bring Back the Hack. Our category is Best Headless SXA Enhancement. So we've added a couple new components to the component library and gated security pages that require login. So I'm going to start by showing what it looks like on the front-end website, and then we'll dive into the content editor and finally to the code. So what are we looking at here? We've got some out-of-the-box SXA components, like the page content component, where ChatGPT has left us a nice poem. And we have the out-of-the-box 10.3 SXA headless navigation component, where we've added some components are the top right here, the user login, and on the profile page that we have here, we've added a user profile component. Now for the required login feature, I can demo that by going to a public page and signing out of my account. Being an anonymous user, I can see any public page just fine, but if I try to access a page that requires login, I am now redirected to login. We've integrated with NextAuth, so we can use any number of SSO providers out of the box. NextAuth has a long list of providers, Azure B2C, AD, Okta, Google, Facebook, etc. So it's very simple to add more. When I do sign in with that, and I've already gone through the flow with GitHub, so it's not going to prompt me here, it's just going to fast forward me to the page. Now that I'm logged in, I can again see my profile page. So let's take a deeper look here. So we've got the SXA toolbox over here, where we've added our account components. The user login component we have up in a placeholder we put up here, and it has a data source that lets us pick some properties for the gravatar, because we've also added the gravatar to that user component. And you can pick the default image as well. And then for the user profile component, you can drag that and drop that in any placeholder. It extends the SXA parameters template, so we get the paint bucket, the style grid, the style options. And then the React component for this can be extended, as you'd like, using the session data that's available to the logged in user. Looking at the Visual Studio solution, there's a few areas I wanted to point out. There's not a lot of code in here. It's mostly just a quick reference to our Docker setup, solution items, specifically the Sitecore CLI setup. We have a couple patterns here that I wanted to point out. We like the idea of having our stubbed folders kind of in each layer. So for example, in the feature, we have a serialized file for all of the items that come right underneath the area. So there's all these different feature areas. We want a node that represents the project. This way, our project code and templating can live alongside other modules. And so we just want to track all the items. So we do that at the feature level, the foundation level, and the project level. And then inside that, we have our regular components. So here we got the account component, and again, just the serialization definition here, where we can now say, now that this is already available, it's one of our dependencies, we can now track everything underneath it for the account module. And we do the same thing for our secured pages items, and et cetera, et cetera. For the headless sites, we also broke those out to track templates specific to those sites as well. And if we look at the folder structure, we've got the Helix convention here. Again, the items for the feature layer, just kind of stubbing out the nodes, and then the module itself tracking out all the sub-items. For the Next.js apps, we put them in a separate folder called sites. That way it just felt really clean having it separate. And then we named it by the site name. And then finally, right before we get into the rendering folder, we have the items sitting right next to it, and then into the Next.js app. So let's take a look at that in VS Code. We started with the Next.js and SXA templates and went from there. The app file we've wrapped in the session provider from NextAuth. That provides access to the logged in session for all the components in the site. We had to extend the Sitecore page props, adding the session object there. And how does that get filled in? Well, it's the integration with NextAuth, which has a very simple central point here. It uses the serverless functions through this API area. And you can activate any provider you want. There's a few available that it comes with, and you saw that long list before that you can use as well. The main thing is you just have to go to that provider, set up your client ID and client secret, and then provide that to the app. As far as the secured pages, We use the middleware. This is a new feature with 10.3 with the redirects, and we really mimic the redirects pattern. And so if you're hosting on Vercel, this can be living out in the edge. This works for XM on-prem, PaaS, or XM Cloud, and we followed that same pattern. So we've got our middleware definition. I wanted to point out that we did also implement the cache, just like redirects has. What is that caching? It's going to cache these settings that we had in the content editor over here. So let's take a look at the content editor. We've got our 3 simple pages, we've got some settings for the Gravatar options, and then we have this security maps area. This is where we can configure what pages require login. We did it all in one place. You can use regex expressions to do entire trees very easily, and just one pattern per line. So we have a bogus one here, and then our profile page. If the URL being requested matches one of these patterns, and the user is not logged in, we want to send them to this login page and then bring them back. So jumping back to this middleware, and we can set that timeout to be any number of seconds as well. The main logic then is going to be in this function here, where we do just that. As it comes into the edge middleware, do we care about this case? If not, continue on. If we do care, we look up to see, run that GraphQL query or pull it from cache. And once we have all those settings from Sitecore, we can say, okay, does the current URL match one of these patterns? If not, continue on. If it does, then we need to check to see if they're authorized. If they're authorized, then they can continue. But if they're not, that's where we're going to do our redirect to that custom login URL. Now, how do we know they're authorized? Well, we can use the nextAuth getToken method. Nextauth creates a cookie token that has the JWT value, and that gets sent with every request, so even the edge middleware can see that token, verify that it's a valid token, and if it is, they're good to go. And there you have it. That is the account module and secured pages. As always, thank you again for a great hackathon year for all who participated, and happy hacking.